During our documentary research and investigation of the dangerous social justice phenomenon threatening the future of Western civilization, we came across the shocking, dramatic events that took place at First Baptist Church of Naples, Florida. As we thoroughly investigated this specific situation, we compiled empirical evidence of a national trend happening in both large and small Southern Baptist churches across the United States.
I once stumbled into a Marxist Baptist church in North Carolina. Sitting in Sunday school for that one Sunday, I confronted the teacher to clarify, was he teaching redistribution of wealth? And he said, absolutely, I am. I let him know that I'm not here to sow discord amongst the brethren and that I wouldn't be back. There is a time and a season. Theologically, a bare-knuckle theological brawl. This is the time. This is the season.
It was an agenda.
When you get evil individuals that want their own personal agenda, driven by money, driven by power, it doesn't matter. But when that happens, the good people get hurt.
They kept saying, we think we need to fundamentally change First Baptist.
You came within a hair's width of having a social justice warrior
Yes.
as the senior pastor of one of the largest and most successful Baptist churches in the United States of America, promoted by the Southern Baptist Convention. Is that fair?
Who was promoting the woke book.
The Woke Church,
Yes.
which is a book promoting the heresy of social justice.
Exactly.
The idea of white privilege, all of the things that have to do with the social justice movement, fly in the face of Scripture. Because even if I had those kinds of thoughts, if any man is in Christ, he's a new creation.
That's right.
The old is gone and the new has come, and all of it's from God.
If there's anyone in your church who knows what they believe and why they believe it, but more importantly, knows what they do not believe and why they don't believe it, you need to cling to them like grim death. You will be unequipped when the left comes into your church.
Tell me about your pastor.
Pastor Hayes is one of the most, how can I say it? He is one of the most honest, God-fearing men. He taught me so much about the Lord, the things that he did way beyond the call of duty. He just did so much at our church. He would be at the hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he's a senior pastor.
He's a wonderful man. He's a man of God. He's a man of prayer, a man of absolute integrity.
If I asked Hayes Wicker a question, he would answer me truthfully, no matter how painful it was for him to do.
Beginning of 2013, Pastor Wicker gave a very impassioned sermon, and it was very much over what was coming out of the Obama administration to marry, that churches will marry gays and lesbians. He said no. After the sermon, I was first one up to him to thank him for being a warrior for the Lord.
He has his faults.
His faults, though, are good faults in that he trusts everybody. He looks for the best in everybody.
Hayes Wicker and the people he surrounded himself with were people I could depend on. And then that all changed.
Hayes Wicker is a very kind man. I don't think he had experience with criminal elements.
A gentleman came in as a missions pastor, and his name was John David Eady. His style, his attitude soured a lot of people. And it was just completely opposite of what Pastor Hayes did.
I believe that from the day John David Eady arrived on our campus, even maybe prior to that he came with an agenda. And I honestly feel in my heart, as much as I love Pastor Wicker, that he let his guard down, because John David Eady, who had known from before, was actually the son of his friend, John David Eady Sr., who was a missionary.
We saw the pastor focus on the spiritual role, and we saw the executive pastor, John David Eady, take over everything else.
Pastor Wicker was unawares of the shift in power that was happening with his executive pastor and his members of his committee.
Many people were beginning to leave, and we saw a shift from an elder-led church to now it seems these committees are all of a sudden running everything, and one or two men are on several of the committees.
I was a layman, a volunteer. We brought more people into the church. Our baptisms were up 30–40%. We even started a Bible study for the people that just came to Christ, and it was awesome. Pastor Hayes was a strong believer in getting the congregation involved in the church. So you grow with the church, you love the church. And John David had a different philosophy. And he just basically started to eliminate laymen, the volunteers, and we had some great missions. We had some great, wonderful people.
The guy that was the executive pastor got himself in trouble with federal authorities at Miami International Airport a few years ago. He went about systematically purging the administration of the church of anybody that knew anything about it. He has a reputation of having done that at a couple other churches before too.
JD was downright rude to people to their face. And it never sat well with me. In fact, I have a sixth sense about people, and whenever he came anywhere near me, the hairs would literally stand up on the back of my neck. When we make mistakes, it's because we didn't listen to the Holy Spirit who guides your reactions and protects you from danger. We think we know better. And I kept thinking, trying to justify that he's a pastor, so I must be wrong, you know, but it happened every time. I would sometimes shudder when he went past me.
He also brought some allies around him. So, and any great Machiavellian does that. So, and I said that to his face, that he was truly a phenomenal Machiavellian. He wanted control from the day he came to that church.
So what we saw with John David was a process over people, and he had to be the center, the leader of that process.
And so many people left the church.
He systematically just purged the administration, and the last member of the purge was Hayes Wicker.
There had been an anonymous letter that had been received at church, accusations against pastor and his wife.
You just went to church one Sunday expecting to hear Pastor Wicker, and he's not there.
He couldn't say goodbye. He didn't get to preach a last sermon.
But it didn't stop there, right?
They had to ruin his reputation. For some reason that was important, and we never understood that. Because the pastor said, I'm willing to leave. Let's come upon a date and a time where we agree that I'm going to leave. Here's my resignation. But that wasn't good enough.
They came out with many reasons why.
Right.
It was very disturbing. It was not just he's retired, he had to leave. There were implications of moral failure in there, to the point where we were questioning, we know this man. I mean, what could it be?
Everybody kept saying, if you just knew what we knew, it is so egregious. We don't have to tell you, you just have to trust us because it's so egregious, we don't want to tell you about it.
So I wrote a list of like 13 questions, and I presented them to him, and I said, the only way you would treat a man like this is if he had committed adultery, if he had some great financial indiscretion.
I even asked him if he was into pornography or something like that, or if he'd had an affair with his wife, because
they were acting so
like it was so bad.
You know,
so
it's
ridiculous.
It's like, we got to get rid of him. We got to get rid of him. He has to
Right
go. He has
now.
to be out of here, and it can't wait till tomorrow. It's got to be right now.
They just kept saying, why won't you believe us? He quit on his own. And then you heard that he had a non-disclosure agreement that he had to sign, was never allowed to speak to anyone. It just kept getting uglier and crazier.
You know, he's not allowed to come and say goodbye to the congregation. So they're trying to decide how they're going to let him address the church, and it's by video. But instead of just showing the pastor's video, the personnel committee stood in front and did a video and said, Pastor has admitted to all of these sins.
They had Troy Boone, the head of the personnel committee, and all of his members behind him, and he was talking, and they were, we call them bobbleheads. It's awful to be like that. But they were all agreeing with him when he said he has admitted to all of these things.
I'm Italian, and I still have a little bit of a temper, and I work on that with the Lord. But that particular day, I almost went over there and...
You were mad.
Very. They manipulated it to the point where they turned everything against Pastor Hayes. The phones in Naples, Florida went crazy. Nobody could believe that that actually happened to Pastor Hayes.
Thank you. Well, church family, it has been a difficult few days for all of us. We were all shocked to learn of Dr. Wicker's resignation this past week. It certainly goes without saying, but Dr. Wicker and Miss Janet are deeply, deeply loved and will be missed immensely in this body. We all, yeah, amen, amen. Church, the next thing for us to do is to pray. We need to pray for the Wickers. Pray for them in this day. Please do.
It's really sad for me to see how all the years the Wickers built up that church, to see rogue leadership come into the church, and watching JD get rid of the strong men in the church.
When we look back at it, I think that this was a coup that was planned last year because 4 of the 5 different people went on vacation together. They kept saying, we think we need to fundamentally change First Baptist. And it's like, what's wrong with First Baptist? Why, things have been going along fine, the ministries that we have and everything like that, but it was like, it needs to be fundamentally changed. There was talk that they would do away with women's ministry, maybe Awanas for the kids, and it was just all kinds of things. And then it was
fundamental change. They were actively pursuing fundamental change.
And maybe we don't need a big church. We need satellite churches and do these kind of ministries. And a comment that I heard was that then we don't have to be at church all the time.
So the Constitution has the break glass in case of fire nuclear option, which is for 10% of the members to request a special business meeting. The pastors vehemently opposed granting a special business meeting.
We want a special business meeting where we can address what we see are the issues of the church. But in order to facilitate that, you have to have some cooperation with the church leadership.
Of course.
We were never able to make that happen.
I'm one of the deacons, so I met with the chairman and said, listen, we need to stop. Stop what we're doing, let's fast, let's pray, let's seek God. And he said, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. King David called the nation of Israel to stop, fall on their face before God and pray. So it seemed reasonable to us to make that recommendation.
So we had 800 people sign a petition asking for a special business meeting, and they wouldn't grant one. They know that season is coming. This is a very seasonal area. They call it snowbirds.
Snowbirds come
in
down to escape bad weather where I live.
You can see that the church is scrambling. They want to shove somebody in there.
Because the seasonal people will vote. If they don't control the vote, they don't control who the next pastor is going to be.
The man that was in charge of the pastoral search committee was a former county manager in Collier County, and he has a criminal history for some shady real estate dealing that he was done. A man of questionable ethics.
And it's public record.
And it is public record.
And yet he's in charge of choosing the next pastor of the church where you attend.
And that's when I started having red flags go off in my head. They selected a young gentleman from North Carolina named Marcus Hayes.
Homosexuality it's a sin. Same-sex attractions. I don't know. I would say that's not a sin.
We had different guidelines that they were supposed to fall under, and they changed the guidelines for him.
Marcus Hayes did not meet the minimum requirement to become our senior pastor.
Part of my career as a firefighter was that I became an investigator. That kind of kicked in my mind, and I said, I really need to know more about this young man.
Sure.
And I got to doing my research, and I found out that he supported people of color that attacked police for enforcing the law.
He's retweeting posts that are aligning with Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter is a violent organization that attacks law enforcement.
I'm a police officer, and I'm very familiar with the BLM movement. I'm very familiar with social justice. We dealt with that on a daily basis. So when we saw these tweets, retweets come up, all cops see her as black.
Is black.
And he gets on stage and says, I may not have written it, but I retweeted it because I agree with it.
He said, I agree with Black Lives Matter. I don't agree with the militant side. Look, police are dying because of this movement, because what it's done is empowered people to go up against the police.
It's not Christian.
It's not Christ-like.
No.
And a pastor in that position, to do that, it lacks huge discernment.
My position was this pastoral search committee failed. They presented a woke candidate to a church who is not woke and doesn't want to be woke. Woke means you're a leftist, but you don't want to admit you're a leftist. You want to conceal that you're a leftist.
What do you know about the social justice movement?
From my understanding, it's moving into a lot of churches around the country. The concept behind that is, to me, Marxism. They have their own agenda. It's not anything in the Bible. And what's sad is there's a lot of individuals that don't even realize that that's happening, and they're just going with it.
Marcus Hayes is woke. He's hiding it. He's deleted the evidence from his social media. We have copies. He tried to hide the fact that that's what I take offense to. If these people want a woke church, why don't 5 of them pool their money, go rent a storefront and start a woke church? Because that's not what revolutionaries do. That's the answer.
Hi, my name is Robbie Gallaty. I'm the senior pastor of Long Hollow Baptist Church.
Hey, First Naples family, this is Kevin Ezel, president of the North American Mission Board.
And it is a privilege of mine to be able to recommend my friend Marcus Hayes.
He genuinely cares and relates to all ages. And you have been very blessed by God that He sent you a guy like Marcus Hayes. So I'll be praying for you. And
videos from the beautiful people in the SBC poured in, pressuring First Baptist of Naples to vote in Marcus Hayes. I have no idea why. That's foreign to me. I've never experienced that.
Did you get the sense that the Southern Baptist Convention was orchestrating this?
He's almost saying,
he's your next pastor.
He's your next pastor, just vote yes.
On the Thursday Q&A, I went to meet Marcus Hayes and Mandy, his wife. In Neil Dorrell's opening was that, there's a radical group within the church that are disseminating misinformation, and that Liz Appling, myself and I.
And you were named publicly.
Yes.
Unfortunately and sadly, there has been, in fact, a concerted campaign of misinformation filled with destructive and divisive content. This is an example that was circulated earlier today, attributed to Liz Appling. I don't know her. I don't know that I'm acquainted with her.
It's not true.
That's not true.
There were lies being said on that pulpit.
Right, she was part of his Bible study group.
I don't know her. I don't know that I'm acquainted with her. And this is a quote. Good morning. It appears that FBCN did not do social media checks on Marcus Hayes because he is a radical, leftist, etc. His Twitter account supports Black Lives Matter, reparations for slavery in America, and the KKK. This is the...
God is in control, and for Jesus I will stand. And they can ridicule me, They can do whatever they want to me, you know, and at the end of the day, they can even take my life. That would be my greatest privilege, to meet Jesus face to face as a martyr. Sorry.
I watched Neil Dorrell publicly shame one of the members of the church and tell lies about this woman. And when Marcus and Mandy were up there, they actually took part in that, in my opinion, because they laughed and stood there while the whole congregation laughed.
And your objections that he also read aloud were very concerning. He endorsed a book, and do you know that the name of the book was?
Woke Church.
Woke Church.
And we heard Marcus himself say that
The heart of the gospel,
is
social justice.
Social justice and reconciling the races. And of course, we greatly differ with that.
Of course.
You know, Christ came to reconcile God with man.
Right. It's a false gospel.
Yes.
Because it tends to tell people that they're victims.
Yeah.
But the real gospel tells everyone Jesus is the ultimate victim, and you were the villain that put him on the cross.
Amen.
It's a real dangerous twist of the gospel.
That's a works-based theology.
And if they're up to something and we've chipped in on their little plan to sneak somebody into the senior pastor role of this church, not going to happen. It's not going to happen on my watch. And I made sure that I came in and voted. And we voted, and they didn't get in.
Marcus Hayes, a highly respected and a well-qualified pastor, remains the man that we believe God has called to be our next pastor. Church leadership does not believe that all who voted no did so based on race, but it is undeniable that race played a part in the final days leading up to this election. Racism has no part in the body of Christ, and never more so than First Baptist Naples. Disciplinary action towards church members who have violated our church covenant by causing dissension, disruption, and spreading of misinformation are underway.
So within 48 hours, there was the call, the vote, and John Eadie's letter went out. I call it the cancer racist sickness letter. A public letter to the SBC, which ended up, parts of it, on the front page of our paper above the fold, calling members of his own church a cancer and a sickness and racist. I cannot imagine a pastor sending out a letter with that language about his own sheep.
370 people, I think, voted against Marcus Hayes. And when John David came out that it's because they're racist, you know, we've got an orphanage of 43 children in Africa.
Clearly you're a racist.
We're not racist.
Remember, we're foster parents.
You're foster parents.
And we're adopting.
And red and yellow, black and white, they are
That's
precious in his sight.
We get them all, we love them all.
We're all one race from Adam.
I mean, there's not one person that I know in that church that is racist. I was born in England and raised in Kenya in Africa and lived 5 years in South Africa. I had 24 years living in Africa. And I left South Africa because of apartheid.
You left because of apartheid?
Yes.
You hated the mean-spiritedness against the African people.
I was raised in what was then the most multiracial country in the world, in Kenya. In South Africa, everything was segregated. The buses, the beaches, the trains, you know, the stores. They couldn't go into the hotels unless they worked there. They were starved.
And you hated that?
Absolutely hated it.
And you hadn't even met the Lord yet, but you knew racism was evil.
As soon as I was able financially to leave South Africa, I left.
And then you come to the United States, you find Jesus at First Baptist Church. You serve, you love, you have a new family now.
Love the Wicker
And then next
family.
thing you know, you're being accused of being a racist.
Yeah.
Racism is something that everybody at First Baptist Church knows is evil.
Absolutely, 100%. If people at First Baptist were racist, do you honestly believe that we would have so many different ethnic people coming to our church and feeling comfortable? I know those families, and those families bled for that church. And those families only stood up for what was right, according to the Bible. Had nothing to do with color, had nothing to do with his personality. He did not fill the 5 qualifications that the search committee was doing on over 100 other people. And because that regime could not handle the truth, were afraid of the truth, they figured, we'll just excommunicate them. But they did not realize how many people are behind those families.
Knowing the people that were excommunicated, have you identified anyone that you would say could legitimately, under any evidence whatsoever, be called a racist?
None of the people I know.
When you asked if we saw racism in the church, we hadn't all these years until this came up. As soon as they called these people racist, we had a really good friend and deacon, fellow deacon, come up to my husband and say to him,
Mike, be honest. If you as a cop, a law enforcement officer, saw 2 cars, one filled with black men, one filled with white men, which one are you gonna pull over?
Come on, Mike, you know.
This is my friend. I've served with him for how many years? And I looked at him and said, his name, I'm gonna pull over the guy who violates the law.
I'm reading a book right now, Removing the Stain of Racism from the Southern Baptist Convention. Have you ever read that book? You ever looked
I haven't read it, but I'm aware of it.
Yeah, well, I've read the book. Some of these black teachers in the seminaries, I empathize with some of the thoughts. I mean, one of the Jarvis Williams, I was reading his bio. He teaches at Southern. I know what he went through as a kid.
Yeah.
I know that. And I have empathy for that.
Sure. But you didn't do it to him.
I didn't do it to him, no, I did not. I did not. And there are better ways of bringing about true justice.
And they're redefining justice on something that's not in the scripture, and that's a problem.
And I understand where these people come from. I've had some really racist experiences during my life growing up, you know, that just really turned my heart to understand something about racism.
What people go through.
Yeah.
So you have sympathy.
I do.
For people who've suffered from racism.
I do.
But you're not a racist.
No.
The pastors are not claiming that they terminated these 17 members through a Matthew 18 process. Nor do they claim they are obligated to use Matthew 18. But they terminated 17 members all within 48 hours of the Marcus Hayes vote going down in flames.
You were slandered and abused publicly,
we were, yeah.
And the response of the Southern Baptist Convention leadership was to agree with it and applaud.
Yep.
How did you feel about the response that came out of the Southern Baptist Convention, specifically J.D. Greear? How did they respond to that letter?
I was very disappointed in his response, that they were so happy that First Baptist Church is taking care of the racism in their church, you know. And I just wrote a letter and I sent it to several people, leaders in the convention, that I was around back when we went through this issue of inerrancy of the scripture. I was involved in it on the church level. And that I love the Southern Baptist Convention. I've been a member of the Southern Baptist Convention since I've been a Christian, since 1968. And that it was, I was very disappointed that they would immediately endorse what had been said, and I just asked them to come talk to us.
Our church has a mantra, move forward. I actually believe that we should move backward and deal with the sin, because I think that's biblical.
J.D. Greear personally responded.
I can't speak for those people, I don't know them, but I gotta believe that they're in that movement, because if they weren't, they would have come down to First Baptist. They would have had a moderator. We would have had a good business meeting. And let me make this really, really clear. I would not be sitting here talking to you right now if, in fact, John David, who, if he had nothing to hide, he would have had that business meeting. We would have operated as Christians. I mean, for Pete's sake, this guy's a pastor. He knows the Bible better than I do. The problem is he doesn't follow it.
We have 2 pastors that are co-executive pastors, I think. We have been flying John Aiken back and forth. The remnant of believers have been scattered. Right now, our pastoral search committee, I don't have the exact quote in front of me. They have a quote on our website that they are looking for the next generational pastor who appeals to all ages and cultures. I've asked, what does that mean? 6 months into our budget, we're $1.2 million off budget. I don't know how they're going to regroup after the quarantine. That's how the church has been functioning.
It's broken my heart. Some days I just don't even want to go to church there anymore. That would be wrong. I need to stay strong and see this through. But my morale is just in the tank right now.
When I last communicated with the deacons, I said, I'm praying for you, but know this, I'm praying for pain. Because I want not just the deacons, I want the whole church to fall on their face before God and say, oh God, we have sinned. Please forgive us. And please do not remove your lampstand from our church. Because when that lampstand is gone, we see in Revelation, oh, this is not a good day for the church. And so
there's a really serious danger.
We have hope.
Woe to the one who scatters my sheep.
Amen.
If they came in front of the church and said, this is what we did, and we are truly sorry, and we repent for those things, and we beg your forgiveness, and then they need to take a seat. They don't need to be involved in the administration of the church anymore. I think that they would be forgiven and welcomed as members of First Baptist.
What should be done about the 18 persons who were excommunicated and publicly slandered?
Just as publicly as they were slandered, they should be apologized to and welcomed back into the church if they want to even be there anymore.
I believe all of them would come back because it's going to get back to the Bible. And these families are Bible-driven, and they believe in repentance. It would be a great sign of healing, of bringing the church back the way it was. Because when Hayes ran that church, it was by the Bible.
I don't want to see other churches go this way. This will destroy the church in America.
My wife and I were having a conversation last night, and we're seeing how far to the left the church is now going. And I'm looking at her and I'm saying,
American church.
America's church. Is it us? Are we abnormal, or is the church abnormal? Did we move, or did the church move? Do we need to move with the church? And she reassured me, no, we have not moved, and we're not going to move. The church is going to the left, and we need to...
Please don't.
We need to be truthful.
Yes.
There's an absolute truth.
Yes.
And we're not moving. Paul, Peter, any of the apostles, they always solve their problems by going back to Scripture. Thus saith the Lord, the Word. And that's going to be our standard.
That's really the call of our movie. We're calling upon Christians all over the world, get back to the Bible.
Yes.
Get back to the fundamentals.
I love Jesus. He's taken care of me. He created me a fearless warrior. And he didn't do that for nothing. Spiritual warfare is 24 hours a day. And the Bible warned us about false prophets coming into the church. What is it they don't understand about that? I have no idea. Do your homework. Stop just coming to church on Sunday or Saturday night. Study Scripture.
Do you miss the church?
I do. I miss my friends there. We stood for the Lord. We stood to protect you and your families and your children from what's coming.
For my brothers and sisters in other Southern Baptist churches, if you think this cannot happen to your church, the left is counting on you to think that way. They are seeking the redistribution of churches. You watch. They are looking to redistribute successful churches to pastors who've worked in unsuccessful churches, because the left redistributes. They can't redistribute competence. Marcus Hayes took his act down to Crossroads Baptist. Conservative believers were contacting us, frightened, reaching out, help us, what do we do? Send us the tweets, send us Marcus Hayes' support of the book Woke Church. They were pulled into their pastoral leadership and instructed to stop. It was over so fast, it's unbelievable.
I noticed that Al Mohler's agreed to have his name put up for president of the convention next year. Every one of these woke young pastors have some connection with Al Mohler. They came from Southern Seminary, they were part of this or that, you know, and I don't know. I have a great concern, and I don't know where he is right now. I honestly don't. I mean, when I read erasing, you know, taking the stain of racism out of the convention, how do you do that? Is this the way you do it? Through social justice? Reparation? What are we going to do? What do we do now?
It just breaks your heart to think that you can't trust your leadership anymore because they've got their own agendas.
There is a concentration of power, and it's being wielded. To me, biblical Christians believe in diffused power and divided authority. Biblical Christians don't believe in revolution, we believe in reformation. We believe in restoring back to the original. Darkness doesn't exist because of darkness. It exists because of the absence of light. And the light is disappearing from our churches.